Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Something Something podcast. My name is Eric Kasloff, and with me, as always, is Larry Sands. How's it going, Larry?
You know, Eric, the birds are shining. It's back and forth hot. It's back and forth cold. It's like that the Katy Perry song. It's hot and
Yeah,
cold, right? Because
yeah,
you never know. Um, Much like creative lives, I think sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. So you just got to do everything you can to
exactly.
keep it lukewarm and the fire stoked, right?
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
way to put it.
Yeah. How is everything going? I know we're kind of getting back in the swing of things, and I know, we've talked to about like getting, like now we're starting to pick up the show again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how does that feel for you after being gone in the hospital? Not really gone. It's like you were on
Yeah.
vacation, but
No, no, it wasn't a vacation at all.
right,
No. Like the
exactly.
first week at the first hospital, I was like, oh man, I don't got to do any podcast. I don't got to edit. I don't got to do any writing. This is going to be awesome. Then around day 10, I was like, okay, this is bad. Then around the month, it was like, yeah, I want to get back to normal. So
Right.
I would say we're back to normal. Now I'm at 100%.
Yeah.
It's just, waiting to get my teeth back.
Yeah, no, I know. And you know what after being gone, I think a lot of creative people go through this, is when they take a break or when something happens and they can't do what they want to do and they get back into the swing of things. Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel awkward?
Comfortable is what I would say.
Comfortable. Okay. All right. Yeah. I know, while I was waiting for you and waiting to hear how you're doing, I was a nervous wreck. And and getting back into the saddle, it just seems like a natural progression. It's always funny because I think as a creative person, no matter where you leave off, I think you can kind of pick it back up, but it's kind of like riding a bike. You never really forget it, right?
I never learned to ride a bike, so I
Uh,
don't understand that analogy.
Never
I'm
mind
not
then.
I'm not joking. I cannot ride a bike.
Really?
I could skateboard. Well, probably now
Oh,
I
well.
shouldn't because my health, this I'm
R-
old,
r- Oh
but
my
yeah.
God. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, Eric, we've had our first couple of shows back and we're kind of kicking things
Yeah.
back into gear. And we have we have some really great guests, some people lined up, actors, filmmakers, and I think we can safely say that this episode is I think it's going to be great because I'm not I'm not an avid reader. What kind of books
You're
do you like to read? Not don't say I am literate. I'm not illiterate. I know what
you're
you're gonna
you're
say.
you're functionally illiterate is what I tell people.
I don't, I'm a slow reader, Eric Kasloff. I'm a visual
Sure.
reader.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I read the gamut. I mean, the bulk of what I read is YA teen horror from the late 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
But I'm also a big sci-fi fan, a big high fantasy fan, as it would be called, motivational books, stuff like that.
Good, good. I'm glad you brought that up because I think our guest is going to be right up not only your alley but my alley as well, just because of the sheer talking points, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Something Something podcast. You like that? Welcome to
Yes,
this
very
episode
much.
of the Something Something podcast. PD Blackwell. Hello, Mr. Blackwell. How are you?
Hi, good. I'm doing great today.
Good, good.
Great.
So PD, you have a new book, and before I start, before we started recording, obviously we do our little pre-interview, and I'm getting the giggles. I'm gonna try this. Okay,
Yeah,
you have
it didn't start off well.
okay. Wait, let me do like whoop. Okay, so PD, you have a brand new book. and it is called Chaos Rising, the Australius Chronicles Volume 1.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
I- so tell us a little bit about your book, and PD, I hope and everybody that's listening knows that Eric and I, we love to kind of joke around and fool around, and we really try to make our guests really comfortable and don't
Yeah.
really don't really want to try to mess up names because as people may know, I have a history of messing up a name. I went, I
Yeah.
went, I went a
Hmm.
whole podcast and we were talking to Vincent, right? His
Vincent
name,
DeSante.
right. And he's a filmmaker. And the whole time I was calling him Vicente because his
Yeah.
name looked like Vicente. And and he goes, "Why do you keep calling me that?" So
And
it's
I just want to point out the whole time I knew you were saying it wrong,
yeah, I know.
and
Thanks
I
for
didn't
pushing me
say
off the cliff
anything.
and free falling and you holding a parachute the whole time. But but let's get back to Chaos Rising, the Australia's Chronicles Volume 1. PD, tell us a little bit about what your new book is about.
Well, it's actually the second edition. I've recently released a second edition of the paperback. The story actually began in the late 70s, believe it or not. I had written a short story and I was attempting to be a writer at that time. And a few friends read it and they liked it. But I had done so much backstory for this short story that I couldn't leave it that way. I knew I had to expand it into a novel. Well, in the early 80s, my life took a major turn, and I studied theology for 15 years. And all the science fiction that I loved was put in the background. Um, and so later on in life, actually in the mid 90s, I looked back at this short story and began expanding it. And I initially published it on Kindle in 2015.
Wow.
And once that was done, I got some really good feedback and decided to uh, write a second novel and then a third to finish out the series. So the first book's available, Chaos Rising. The second book, The Raisu Alternative, is the second book, and that's available. In fact, the paperback for that was just released this week.
Wow.
And it's been
Cool.
on Kindle for a while, though. And then the third book is still in progress. I haven't finished that yet. That should be done by the end of the year.
Nice.
Wow. Wow. And one thing, and I'll say this as long as we do our podcast, because it always never ceases to surprise me that that this sounded like it's obviously a work in progress. And
Mhm. Mhm.
with every creative life we have two sides of the people who do are a musician, actor, filmmaker, author, right? We always, because that's us, we always have our regular normal work life, and then when we transition into our creative life, obviously that's where our projects come from. And it never ceases to amaze me that people who have, and especially authors, and I think screenwriters as well, but they start something years ago, years and years and years ago, and then it slowly becomes what it is available today to the public. And when I know that when I work on something, I do editing and things like that. I know if I edit something and walk away and come back, I look at it maybe with a fresh pair of eyes, right? Or a new
Mhm.
perspective. Did something like this or that take place with your books?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I never, when I was younger, when I was in high school, we had a science fiction as literature class. And I had been reading science fiction since junior high school, but I never thought of being a writer.
Hmm.
And that class lasted one semester. The following semester, it was a modern media class, which I didn't really like very much. But one day in class, we had to do this writing assignment, and I turned it in. And about 10 minutes later, the teacher called me back to his desk and wanted me to sit down there. And he asked me if I ever wanted to be a writer. And that's the first time that idea ever came to my mind.
Wow.
And so that kind of sparked something in me. If he thought that was possible, maybe I should pursue it a little more. And so I did. And when I began writing the short story, to me, everything has to make sense, right? Especially in a story. Otherwise,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's not going to work. So I didn't have a personal computer in the late 70s, but I had taken architecture and mechanical drafting in school. So I created a three-dimensional map of a very small portion of the galaxy
Wow.
because I had to know the correct travel routes through the stars that these guys would take. And that was important to me for the flow of the overall story. And that's the way I am. When I get into something, I really get into it. But that interest was cut short when I started studying theology.
Mm.
So when the 15 years were done and the official 15 years were done, and I began doing other things, and I picked this up. And at the time, I worked for Teledyne Ryan Aeronautical as a photographer, and one of the guys in the department was an exceptional artist. I'm an artist too, but this guy was fantastic. And I asked him to read the short story and to illustrate it if he could, and he did. I was just blown away. And he goes, "Dude, there has to be more to the story than that, you know." Well, there actually was. And the short story centered around a botanist who was the leader of this settlement on this distant planet. And they had a lot of problems on that planet. And she is still in the novel, but she's a secondary character, very important character. But everything evolved out of that incident of her on this planet. And it has many characters now. It's a very complex saga. And so what happens is, as humanity began to uh, travel between the stars, um, they began settling various planets. And at the time the story takes place, about 1,500 years from now, they've settled hundreds of planets. And those planets are controlled by an organization called the Merchant Alliance of Great Clans. They control space travel and planetary settlement to make sure everything's done properly. Well, one of the clans owns a mine on a planet orbiting Alpha Cephei, the star. And it's made that clan very extremely wealthy. But one day that mine is completely destroyed. And some of the ships in orbit are also destroyed. And that's where the chaos begins, because the alliance begins to fracture. Because the clans, they start pointing fingers at who they think is responsible. And that's not a good situation. And but it's more than that, because survivors from the mine, some of the survivors, and some of the survivors from the ships that are attacked, they start having the same dream of a woman trapped in a cave screaming in agony. That's pretty odd. And the more people learn about this after effect, it becomes a mystery that's entangled with everything else that's happening, and it unravels as the story progresses. And there was so much to this situation that I couldn't keep it in one book. So volume 2 continues that saga, and volume 3 is the end result of everything that occurs.
So PD, I mean, it's not just, when you say volumes, it really is like an epic, like I don't even want to say a three-part book. It really is this epic. How do you keep it all? How do you keep it all in your mind and then transfer it to the page?
Well, that's the thing. I don't keep it in my mind. A lot, a lot of writers just sit down and start writing, but I need to create a plot, a very detailed plot.
Yeah,
I need to know who the players are going to be, what moves are going to be made on the board, so to speak.
yeah.
And so if I finish chapter one, I know I can go work on chapter 19 if I want to, because I know what's going to happen there. So I know the general overall arc of the entire story, but I haven't really completed the detailed plot for volume three yet. I'm working on that right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's super
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome. Because with me, I do screenplays and I'm a big, huge outliner. It usually starts off, I write a quick log line for it. Then I do my character bios, who's going to be in it. Then a paper and pen outline. Then an index card outline, then one more paper and pen outline. Then I finally go to my screenwriting software. I don't understand people who just sit down and write.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. It's kind of like planning a cross country trip, but not saving money, not having a map. I mean, sure, you might have fun, but if you don't bring enough gas money, you're going to get stuck in the middle of nowhere and have someone come rescue you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the characters are what drive the plot of any
Yeah.
good story.
Hmm.
So there are changes I make along the way under certain circumstances because they're the ones who really dictate what happens. But generally, I know what has to happen and who's going to be there and so forth, you know. It just
You,
makes the whole process that much easier to do.
Oh, yeah.
you know what jumped in my mind, and I think it's very important, and I hope that people get to listen to this because I think I think when you decide to become a creative person and follow your passion, right? And things that you know that that's your path, but I think there comes a time and just like you, I know with me, like I was in like a psychology class when I was in high school and I was doing a play and my psychology teacher came and she saw the play um and then the next day and I just had a small little part and I'll get to what I'm trying to say is but she gave me a note and she said there was something about it that you just did so good. And I started thinking to myself, wow, maybe this could be a thing. And I say that knowing that you had that same experience. And I want to point out that whoever's listening to this and you have to put yourself out there in front of anybody and everybody because you never know who you're going to inspire and you never really know who's going to say those words. There was something about it, or gosh, have you ever thought about, and in your case, PD, being a writer and pursuing this? Because I mean, without that, PD, you wouldn't be where you are today,
That's true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And you know, a lot of it too is sticking with it
Hmm.
because I mean, you kind of put it to you kind of put it aside, you did your thing, and then you came back to it. And do you feel, PD, that that everything that you've been through in your life, right, in the past, has it led up to this moment right here, right now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What can you tell like our listeners? And I think we're really good. You know, I think our podcast really touches on the creative people who are doing it, thinking about doing it, want to get some inspiration and like knowing, you know, I mean, we really don't BS people because, you know, we want people to know what the real deal is when you become a creative. what would you tell people about wanting to pursue a, a creative career, number one, and then really letting life take you where it wants? Because maybe I think that's part of the creative journey. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. The old adage, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah,
Um, to be a good writer, you need to practice. To be a good actor, you need to practice. To be good
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
And if you practice enough, you don't even have to think about doing it. It just happens because you're used to it.
I love it.
So, with me, it's all about research, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. If your world isn't real to the reader, then it's not going to be a very interesting one.
Yeah,
So I learned long ago to put everything you can pull from to create your characters, to create your environment, everything. And
yeah,
it works out if it's done well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And not everyone
Absolutely.
is going to like what you do. That's, in fact, there was a story from that science fiction class I had in high school. One day we read a short story by Ray Bradbury called Fever Dream. I don't know if you've ever read that story.
Mm-mm.
And at the end of the discussion, the teacher asked one of the students what they thought about the ending. And she thought it was really a happy ending, very, very celebratory, and it was great. I was shocked when she said that because Bradbury had laid enough clues and actions in that short story to come to a very specific ending that was much more menacing. I was not happy at all, but she just couldn't see it. And the teacher
Mm.
failed her that day because he didn't even ask her one question about her opinion to help open her mind to a reality that she couldn't see.
Wow.
And so that told me no matter how well crafted any writing is, there will always be someone who just doesn't get it, who can't see what you're trying to say. And that's understandable,
Yeah,
because everyone comes from a different uh, place in life. They're looking
yeah.
at the world through their eyes, not yours.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I knew then that if I was going to be a writer, I would have to make things obvious enough to get my message across in a way that was interesting to people and would encourage them to read more.
That statement
That's
right
good
there,
stuff.
that's heavy. When you think about it, because I think, I don't know, Eric and PD, how you guys feel about this, but I think as a creative person, whether you're a filmmaker, musician, writer, I think, can there be any inside, not a like an inside story that is like, hopefully people will pick up, or the people that know. I hope this is making sense, because it
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
goes along with what you were talking about. I think as a creative person, I think we have to live our creative truth. But just like you, PD, you have to figure out your creative truth, the things that you want to really give out and maybe give hints about, but really let it be known that everybody, and then the people who pick up on it will be like, oh my God, did you see that?
Yeah.
I bet you didn't even notice. And it's like different strokes for different folks. But how do you skirt that, PD, in your books without, because I don't think you overtly go, here's the plot, and you bang people over the head as
Right.
they read. How do you oh gosh, how do you write that, and how do you deal with that?
Well, the fiction is not me espousing my ideals. It's all based on a situation that involves characters, and the characters react to the situation. So the story is pushed along different paths based on what the characters do and what they experience and the decisions they make in reaction to what they experience.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And that is spoken like a true, I think a true writer, because again, and you've said it just now, you've said it earlier, and it's really all about the characters and the characters' lives and how they interact and come together. And when they come together, that's when the is that when the aha moment kind of takes place for people? It goes, oh, now I
Yeah,
kind of get
because
it.
people reading is different than watching a movie.
Right.
Because when you
Yeah.
read, you're really more involved in everything that happens because you have to imagine in your mind. You create this imagery in your mind based on what the writer's written, and it draws you closer to the action. You experience what the protagonist experience. You
Yeah.
experience what the antagonist experience. You become much more meshed with that story than when you're sitting in a theater just watching things go by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I say that's why Eric jokes with me. But I really am I am that reader.
Illiterate.
That's what I am that reader that probably that's why I imagine everything as it's being as I read it, and I'm kind of processing what it all looks like, and oh, the movement of the hand and the breath and what the writer is trying to say, and all these expressive, you know what I'm talking about. I'm just getting kind of in the weeds with it, but that's why. And I would imagine that you have how many pages are your books?
Oh, that's a good question. Depends how they're printed, but let me take a look at the new printing of Chaos Rising. It is 382 pages,
382, okay.
about 120,000 words.
Okay. And
And the
any go
yeah,
ahead, go
volume
ahead.
two is about 350 pages.
Any average reader, I say average, any reader at all would look at this and be like, "Ugh, I could read this in, is it safe to say they'd read it in a month or is it sooner?"
Oh yeah, yeah, that'd be easy to do. Yeah, if they're a good
Okay.
reader. Yeah, yeah.
For
They could probably,
me,
yeah.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, that's fine. Yeah, they could probably reread it in a week if they really wanted to.
Right,
Exactly. It
and
depends on how engaged they get with the
yeah,
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I would imagine just from talking to you
Hmm.
and your creative process and the things that you just talk about, and if it's anything in your book like I'm picturing and imagining, I would probably take about 6 months to read it, and I'd be like, I'm so tired after I read 3 pages.
Hopefully not. A lot of the reviewers have commented on how quick the pace is.
That's unbelievable. I
I
love
get right
that.
to the point. I only like even in a screenplay, you can only show so much, right?
Right, right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you have to hit the high points to make that story continually move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I was very pleased when some of the reviews came back and how impressed they were with how quickly the pace was, but it wasn't so quick that they didn't get anything from it.
yeah,
It just
yeah.
wasn't boring as they read. That was great to hear
Yeah.
that.
And actually I am on your website, which is
Great website, by the way.
yeah, it's
Oh, thank you.
pdblackwell.com. Links are in the description. But one of them, it's from favorite readers or readers' favorite. It's a website, a compelling, complex, and cinematic work of science fiction with plenty of chilling psychological undertones and all-out action scenes. That's
Wow.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it was great.
well, and I see that kind of like that pumps me up because I mean, I don't know if those are kind of like words and a review that you would watch something and
Mhm.
they would say that about like an action film or something that they're watching. And it again, it kind of blows my mind because thinking about your book and what you've been talking about, that's really it becomes this action movie of sorts in your head. Obviously, it's a book, right? But I
Yep.
think what I'm trying to say is it that makes it all the more um interesting and compelling for people to go read it.
Yes. And what makes it so great about as far as being something you read because you read it, it's unique to everybody who reads it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
You
that's
know?
so much fun about getting into a book is, the main character looks different to everybody
Yeah.
or little things like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, talk talk for a minute about your intent to um to put a biblical narrative to it.
Well, there isn't. That's separate.
Okay.
The other book I've written, the nonfiction book, was a completely separate thing.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And I had somebody ask me, well, how can you separate the two? It's coming from you. Well, it is, but it's coming from the characters. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
the only scene that's anything near being religious in the first novel is a chapter called Burial, where they're burying these guys, and one of the characters asked another one if he's a spiritual man, and he responds by saying that he prefers to focus on the here and now.
Mm.
And that's the limit of anything religious in that whole story.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
And again, I think, that's like, a true artist goes, that's not me. And that's very true. It's like, you hear interviews and people with actors and musicians and they go, I don't know. It wasn't me. It just came out. It just came out. And
yeah,
I find it and I will always find it fascinating that you're able to stick to your guns, so to speak, and write what your characters do and say, and not necessarily PD Blackwell what he wants to say. I find
yeah,
that
yeah.
super. I mean, that's just awesome to me.
Well, it's like what Shakespeare said: the play's the thing, right?
Amen. Yeah.
So the book is the thing
Yeah, yeah,
for a writer. It's like
yeah.
people who write books about slashers and people who kill people. That doesn't mean they have to do
Eric.
Wait, what are you saying?
that.
What?
That was good.
Wait, what? Hold on.
Eric, I'm never going to visit you again in New Jersey.
Yeah.
I
That was
thought it was right what you know.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was good. PD, and it just dawned on me. When does Chaos Rising take place?
In the year 3525.
Okay.
So
Perfect. Perfect.
about 1500 years from now. And
Wow.
I said it at that date because for me, for the things to happen in the story that need to happen, to me, it had to be at a time when it would be possible, when mankind would be able to travel between the stars, and that whole situation would legitimately take place.
Wow. You really are an engineer and a designer because you know, I think with that type of that background, you're able to do this foundation where it starts at the ground level and it really works its way up. I mean, when you were talking about, like you mapped out the stars to do
Yeah,
your
That's
book.
yeah,
insane.
I mean, that says a lot. That says a lot to your creativity and your um your oh gosh, what am I trying to think? Your passion for the craft of true storytelling.
well, thank you.
I'm blown away. I gotta tell you, I mean, you're wanting me to pick up your book. I mean, you're getting me to the point where I'm like, man, I gotta get his book and read it because
Well,
it
thank you.
just
Yeah,
you've done such a brilliant job. I mean,
Yes,
I don't know. I'm just
100%.
blown away. Sorry. Sorry.
yeah.
This is
There's a lot of characters, a lot of different factions in the book. It's kind of like a Game of Thrones in space, in some way.
Oh, I'm even more hooked now.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. Where
yeah.
now let me ask you this. where can you get your book? But even
Right.
more importantly, now before you say that, I do want to say, is there a place that you can get an autographed copy of your book?
No, there is not.
Oh, okay. Maybe
No.
you should think about that on your website and do autographed copies.
Yeah, I should. I should. Yeah.
That would be amazing. You know
Yeah.
what? And Eric, maybe you would be a little bit more I don't know. You sound like the Ray Bradbury type of
Mm.
author.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
I
that's
tried to,
amazing.
he was an important figure in my past, in my reading,
Yeah.
but, so was Robert Heinlein and Asimov and Frank
Mm.
Herbert and all those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A lot of legends right there. All the
Yeah.
legends of the genre.
Yeah.
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 And, Clark's in there too somewhere, Arthur C. Clarke.
Mm.
What is it? What is it about writing that draws you in and makes you want to write?
That's a very good question. I think it's the ability to create something that's purely mental
Mm,
that will impact people.
mm.
And it's also a way to relieve stress, to get out your
Yeah.
problems and stuff. But as far as novel writing, if the story is intriguing enough, it's interesting to me just to write it and to come up with all these different facets to it. Because I've studied physics and a lot of things. I've done a lot in my life. So it's enthusiastic for me to um, grab hold of some of the things I've learned in my life and to use them to compose something that's going to impact other people.
Mm, mm.
I guess that's a long way of saying it makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of impact, I mean, as we I gotta tell you, as we start to wrap up, talk about the impact and what's that been like for people who know you and to write how many books do you have available?
Just the two in the Rustelius Chronicles series, and then the book I wrote, the nonfiction about Christianity.
Mm.
And what has been the response with your books?
It's been positive from everyone I've heard from. The Christianity book, um, I got a few snarky reviews, and I expected that. But most of the response to that has also been extremely positive. I was quite surprised. Some of the people I know, I didn't expect them to enjoy that book, but I was really amazed that they did.
Wow.
Because just like the novel, there's a lot of information that's available. And so I wanted to focus on how God has been represented throughout the centuries. And that still would lead to a lot of information. So I crafted it down to a very narrow outline and wrote chapters on various subjects. And the second half of that book, I examined the theology of each New Testament author by examining what they wrote about Jesus. And I was pretty amazed that uh, the positive remarks I've gotten from people who don't necessarily believe everything I believe,
Hmm.
Mm.
but just the way it was put together, there's a lot of quotes. I mean, it's all backed up with facts. And I think that's the thing with nonfiction. Facts are everything. You have to present a theory or a proposal that makes sense.
Hmm.
And hopefully it will encourage some people to look at their religion with a little different view, maybe open their eyes a little bit to some things they never thought of before.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool. And I know I asked you before, but with all the people who are thinking about writing or following their passion, um, what what is one thing or a few things that you would tell that one person out there that's maybe listening in their car, maybe listening late at night doing schoolwork, or just listening, try to relax and really searching for something? Because I love the fact that we get to on our podcast talk about the creative and the good, the bad, the ugly, but really hear from the creators, the creatives that that uh, we all creatives go through a bunch of crap in our life.
Mhm.
And we have to find a way to pick ourselves up and forget about, actually, it's kind of like what you said about writing. It's an escapism. But to be able to pick yourself up after a long day, a long night of whatever, and to be able just to go and pick up a pen, pick up a guitar.
I play the guitar too, by the way.
Oh, you do?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We should have had you play the guitar. That's awesome. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What would you say to those people that are just not necessarily looking, but they're just trying to find a way to balance their life with their creative life?
Well, you have to believe in yourself, first of all. And someone told me about writing. If you want to do it good, you just have to keep writing
Mm,
Mm.
and take every opportunity, even if it's a 10-minute break at work, to write something down,
mm,
to learn the craft of, creating a sentence that makes sense, you know,
yeah.
increase your
Yeah.
vocabulary, read everything you can get your hands on, learn more about people and how they react, the psychology and everything about living is something that needs to be pulled from to create another world. But basically, just write. And then when you do write, think about it first, craft it well before you even begin doing the narrative. Because if you don't believe in what you're writing about, it's never going to succeed.
Wow. Wow. That that is the
And I
most
think
simplest and heaviest thing. Yeah, go ahead, Eric. That's amazing.
that was the absolute mic drop, and I
Beautiful.
don't know what else we could add.
Beautiful. PD, thank you.
PD, yeah, we
Yeah.
No,
just
thank you.
want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything with us. Well, the links to where you can purchase the book will be in the links if you're listening in over on Anchor. And when the episode goes up, we will make sure to put all the tags on our social media. PD, once again, thank you so much, everyone. These books sound awesome. We all need to go check them out.
On
And like
Amazon.
on
Yes, go ahead.
Amazon,
Yes.
and like we say each and every week, remember everybody, be excellent to each other. We good, Larry?
Oh yeah, I'm the one recording. Hang on, sorry.
Yeah.